On March 17, 2012, in Little Village, Chicago, 6-year-old Aliyah Shell was on her front porch, seated on her mother's lap while they waited for a ride to a birthday party. A stolen gray pickup truck slowed as it approached the residence. 2 Latin King gang members, 19-year-old Luis Hernandez and 21-year-old Juan Barraza, intended to target a rival gang member when Luis leaned out and began firing. Multiple shots were discharged towards the porch, and Aliyah was hit several times. Relatives immediately carried her inside and called 911. She was transported to Mount Sinai Hospital, where she was pronounced dead shortly after arrival. During the 2015 trial, prosecutors argued that Luis could clearly see children present on the porch but continued firing. Defense attorneys challenged the credibility of eyewitness identifications, citing the stress and speed of the event, but the jury ultimately found Luis guilty of first-degree murder and was sentenced to 65 years in prison. Juan was convicted under the accountability theory, meaning he was held criminally responsible for participating in the gang-related act that resulted in Aliyah's death and was sentenced to 50 years in prison. Both remain incarcerated in Illinois State Correctional Facilities. On the evening of March 17, 2013, 27-year-old married father of 3, Nathan Leon, was working as a Domino's pizza delivery driver near Golden, Colorado. Concerns escalated when Nathan did not check in or return from his route after a delivery. His vehicle was found abandoned, and his body was discovered on an edge of a soccer field with multiple gunshot wounds. After investigators began reconstructing Nathan's final hours, attention quickly focused on 28-year-old Evan Ebel, a recently paroled white supremacist gang member. Evan was accidentally released from prison on January 28th due to a clerical error and removed his ankle monitor 2 days before Nathan's murder. He allegedly manipulated his friend Stevie Marie Vigil to buy him a 9mm handgun after his release. Evan stole Nathan's Domino's uniform and pizza carrier. 2 days later, Evan showed up at the Colorado Department of Corrections Director Tom Clement's home to lure him out. When Tom opened the door, Evan shot him once in the chest, killing him. On March 21st, Evan was spotted in his car while in Wise County, Texas. He was pulled over by Deputy James Boyd, whom he shot and wounded in the head before fleeing. A car chase ensued, with Evan firing out of his window at pursuing officers. He accidentally smashed his car into a semi-truck, got out, and continued firing at officers. Evan was shot and critically wounded. He was taken to a local hospital where he died. Deputy James Boyd eventually recovered from his injuries. Stevie was sentenced to more than 2 years in prison for giving the handgun to Evan. On March 17, 2023, 32-year-old Camera Barnes was shot inside Cocktails and Company Bar in Marion, Iowa during St. Patrick's Day celebrations. The bar was crowded with patrons when a confrontation started between Cameron and another man later identified as 30-year-old Deval Walker Jr. What began as a verbal exchange quickly escalated into a physical altercation. The two men moved toward each other in a crowded area of the bar as several patrons attempted to intervene and separate them. During the struggle, Deval picked up someone's handgun off the floor and shot Cameron. Emergency responders arrived shortly after the shooting, and Cameron was transported to a nearby hospital. However, Cameron later died from the gunshot wound. Police arrested Duvall and charged him with first-degree murder. During the 2024 trial, prosecutors argued that Duvall intentionally fired the weapon during the fight, while defense attorneys argued that the shooting occurred during a chaotic struggle and challenged whether prosecutors had proven intent beyond a reasonable doubt. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours before finding Duvall guilty of first-degree murder. Duvall was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. In February 2026, the Iowa Court of Appeals reviewed the case and determined that a juror had demonstrated bias during deliberations. The appellate court ruled that the juror's conduct compromised the fairness of the trial. As a result, Duvall's conviction was overturned and the sentence was vacated. The case remains subject to further legal proceedings. On March 17, 2024, a mass shooting occurred in Northwest Washington, D.C. during the early morning hours of St. Patrick's Day celebrations. At 3:01 a.m., officers with the Metropolitan Police Department responded to reports of gunfire near the intersection of 7th Street and P Street Northwest, an area known for its nightlife and entertainment venues. When officers arrived, they located 7 victims suffering from gunshot wounds after multiple shots had been fired. Emergency medical personnel began treating the 5 injured while police secured the scene and began an investigation. 2 men were pronounced dead at the scene. They were identified as 32-year-old Anthony Brown of Southeast Washington, D.C. and 32-year-old Jay Lux of Baltimore, Maryland. Detectives worked to determine the sequence of events that led to the shooting and how many individuals may have been involved. Authorities announced a reward of up to $50,000 for information leading to the arrest and conviction of those responsible. No final convictions have been announced in connection with the shooting, and the investigation remains ongoing. In the early hours of March 18, 1990, 13 works of art were stolen from the Isabella Stewart Garden Museum in Boston, Massachusetts. The theft occurred shortly after St. Patrick's Day celebrations had filled the city with crowds and activities. At approximately 1:24 a.m., 2 men dressed as Boston police officers arrived at the museum's employee entrance. Security guard Rick Abath answered the intercom. Rick had experience working overnight security and was familiar with the building's quiet routine. The men told Rick they were responding to a disturbance call. Without verifying their identities through official channels, Rick unlocked the door and allowed them inside. Once inside the secured foyer, the men approached the security desk and asked if anyone else was in the building. Rick radioed fellow guard Randy Hesthand to return to the desk. It was Randy's first overnight shift. The men then told Rick he resembled someone with an outstanding warrant and instructed him to step away from the desk to provide identification. When Rick complied, the men handcuffed him and stated that this was a robbery. When Randy arrived moments later, he was also restrained. Both guards were escorted to the basement where the thieves bound them to pipes using tape and handcuffs. The guards were left unable to call for help. The thieves then began moving through the museum. Motion detectors recorded activity beginning at approximately 1:48 a.m. The perpetrators remained inside for about 81 minutes. Their primary focus was the Dutch room on the second floor, which housed several of the museum's most valuable paintings. The thieves smashed protective glass and cut paintings directly out of their frames, causing permanent damage to the works. Among the items stolen was the concert by Johannes Vermeer. Experts estimated the value of this painting alone at more than $200 million, making it the single most valuable unrecovered painting in the world. Several works by Rembrandt van Rijn were also taken, including The Storm on the Sea of Galilee, Rembrandt's only known seascape. That painting is estimated to be worth over $100 million. Another Rembrandt painting, A Lady and Gentleman in Black, was also removed, along with a small self-portrait etching. The thieves also stole Chez Tortoni by Edouard Manet, valued at tens of millions of dollars. 5 drawings by Edgar Degas were taken from a nearby display case. Though smaller in size, these works are considered extremely valuable due to their rarity and historical significance. In addition to the paintings and drawings, the thieves removed a bronze eagle finial from a flagpole inside the museum. By approximately 2:45 a.m., the thieves exited the building and disappeared. The crime was not discovered until later that morning, when the next shift arrived and found the guards still bound in the basement. Authorities quickly determined the theft was carefully planned. The thieves appeared to have knowledge of the museum's layout, security procedures, and the locations of high-value artwork. The Federal Bureau of Investigation assumed primary responsibility for the case. Over the years, investigators have pursued numerous leads, many involving organized crime figures in the Boston area. One theory suggests the artwork was stolen to serve as bargaining tools within criminal networks, potentially trading for reduced sentences or used as collateral in illegal transactions. Another theory proposes that the paintings were moved overseas shortly after the theft and stored in private collections where they cannot be publicly displayed. Attention focused on Rick, the guard who allowed the thieves inside. Some investigators question whether his actions were negligent or suspicious. However, Rick has never been charged with any crime, and authorities have not identified him as a participant in the robbery. Other suspects connected to organized crime died in the years following the heist without facing charges, leaving investigators without definitive answers. Today, more than 3 decades later, none of the stolen works have been recovered. The empty frames remain on the museum walls as placeholders for the missing art. The Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum continues to offer a reward of up to $10 million for information leading directly to the recovery of the works. Under U.S. federal law, the statute of limitations for the theft itself has expired in 1995. This means that individuals involved in the original robbery can no longer be prosecuted for that specific crime. As a result, authorities have publicly stated that anyone, including the perpetrators, can return the artwork without facing prosecution for the theft. Officials emphasize that the primary goal is the safe recovery of the art. Despite ongoing tips and investigations, the location of the stolen works remains unknown. Today, it is estimated to be worth approximately $500 million. The Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum heist remains unsolved and stands as the largest art theft in history. Thank you, friends, for joining me today. If you enjoyed the stories in this episode, please like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to be alerted to all future content. If you have a story you would like me to read, feel free to email me your submission for a chance to hear your story on a future episode. Thank you again, friends, for your love and support. I'm Avaria, and until next time, take care.